We're driving, on vacation and driving.
It's fun. Just drive a few miles and you're happy. You can't do it enough.
It's simple and carefree. It really works.
It's not a car, it's not an object. It's really part of the family.
This is a car that stimulates the senses. You have the sound of the engine, the smell, the feel, and especially the view.
When you see everything it can offer and get done, it's really a great car for its size. It's like a quirky, cozy little cocoon. You really feel good in it.
Ask the Japanese what they want to take photos of. It's a 2CV under the Eiffel Tower.
Its greatest asset is that an extraordinary car, the first four-wheel drive in the world.
It makes people smile. It spreads happiness. It makes people smile, so it fills my heart too. I'm so happy with this car.
The deux chevaux was the result of a collaboration between a painter, a graduate of the prestigious Beaux-Arts school, and known on the Paris scene, Edouard Michelin, the multi-talented André Michelin, and the architect Pierre Boulanger, all of whom would not normally be involved in such a project.
Titine, douche, dodoche, deux pattes. These words are familiar. For over 60 years, the 2CV has been in our daily lives. It captivated the imagination of the French and was exported around the world. And yet nothing guaranteed this small car such a fate. In Auvergne, the idea of the 2CV was born thanks to two men who wanted to help others. Without a doubt, the seeds of this exceptional destiny. Tire manufacturer Michelin, headquartered in Clermont-Ferrand since 1889, conducted research towards improving the mobility of people and goods.
In 1922, the Michelin brothers, André and Edouard, had the inkling that there was a market for a small, economical car. A car that had yet to be invented. Michelin launched a major automobile survey and found that in the United States there was one car for every 10 inhabitants, while in France there was only one for every 150. Why?
Michelin conducted this first study of 10,000 people to understand a bit about what would attract people, what price they were prepared to pay for a car, what they would use it for, how fast it should go.
How much space, how much weight should it bear, what accessories, what's the desirable top speed on the flats? Really practical questions, which begin to define the specifications for a widely popular car. In 1902, Michelin provided its staff with free health care, and in 1910 marked the creation of the Michelin Cooperative, where one could shop for daily groceries, clothes, shoes, furniture, and all that. Furthermore, around this time, Michelin created housing which gave birth to the famous Michelin cities that largely shaped the urban landscape. This idea of a household car continued to develop during the 20s and 30s, and in the early 30s, Michelin created a report entitled The Ideal Car, full of very practical specifications. This document, for instance, dates from December 1930 and included the worst undesirable defects, noting a water pump that frequently leaks, a loose rod under the hood, unadjusted brakes, a battery that doesn't charge, general flaws. These flaws were no longer acceptable and needed to be eliminated.
This car has a small history. Yes, it's a little emotional because a former student from the agricultural school where I worked called me one day to ask if I was looking for a van. Now, these vans, 550 pounds as marked on its bumper, are very rare because they are the first cars that actually worked. So I went to see this car, which was a PTT, and when I saw it, it was worse for wear. So I asked how he wanted. And he said, "No, I'm giving it to you because it was my grandfather's car. And my father doesn't want it. He wants to throw it out. And I'd like to see it drive again." And it moved me. I think Emmanuel Moron would be glad to see his car driving again.
When Édouard Michelin bought the car manufacturer Citroën in 1935, he had probably already envisioned his ideal car. Now he finally had the opportunity to put this project, so dear to his heart, into action.
Édouard Michelin named his son Pierre Michelin head of Citroën, and Pierre Boulanger was named vice chairman of the board.
Pierre Boulanger returned to Michelin in the early 20s and very quickly went to work closely with Édouard Michelin. Boulanger was an aviation enthusiast, having spent much of the First World War working with the Air Force, mostly doing reconnaissance and aerial photography.
He also developed a cartridge of 50 images used to take pictures of the battlefield and was awarded the Military Cross, Military Medal, and had the Legion of Honor for acts of bravery and injury, and he found himself at the Ministry of War. And this is where Marcel Michelin hired him in 1919.
Had the Michelin spirit and was always looking towards the future, toward technological innovation.
I don't know if there's a common spirit. There's something, and this is very clear, a way of thinking, a culture of privacy and discipline. It wasn't because he was the boss that he was so respected. He dressed like the members of the Michelin cooperative, with his gray felt hat, his gray tie. He looked like a typical Michelin worker.
With the advent of the paid vacation in the 30s, not only was the automobile greatly democratized, but travel in general was democratized.
In 1936-37, Pierre Michelin reflected on the survey which led to the VSC, very small car.
Pierre Boulanger, who was older than Pierre Michelin, would have to support him in this mission. But when Pierre Michelin tragically died in a car accident at the end of 1935, Pierre Boulanger became his successor as director of Citroën.
When Pierre Boulanger joined Michelin in 1919, he bought some property to settle down in the town of Lamdes, a small village near Clermont-Ferrand.
When Pierre Boulanger lived there, it was a Pierre Michelin-style estate surrounded by walls and so on. In 1996, that the municipality of Lomped bought this property to use it for the current town hall. One day walking through the Lampdes market, Pierre Boulanger realized there weren't any cars, only horse carts. Women went to the market to sell the products from the farm, such as rabbits, vegetables, chickens, and during this time men would play cards or have coffee in the bistro on the corner. Boulanger realized farmers only had one day off a week and therefore it was essential for them to have a reasonably priced car. And from there he pushed a little more to specify the production guidelines.
Concernant la 2 chevaux.
The specifications for the two CVs were simple: to be able to transport a barrel of wine, 50 kilos of potatoes, consuming less than 5 liters to 100, and the ability to go up to 4. It needed to be an extremely flexible size since it was necessary to cross a plowed field with a basket of eggs without breaking any. You can drive 50,000 kilometers without having to change any important piece. The car costs less than 10 francs per year to maintain.
The vehicle needed to be simultaneously lightweight, economical, sturdy, comfortable, and reliable.
And it was ugly enough that if you do damage the car, it wasn't very serious anyway.
I have a very special attachment to this car because it was my first car. My parents had a 2CV and it was the first car I drove. Soon enough I was driving it around the Place de l'Étoile, and then I drove it to the university in Germany. On the way, I felt my car slow down and stop. I put on the brakes and pulled up in front of 3 parked 2CVs. It was a German collector. He helped me to fix my car and lent me another just to help me. The car allowed me to meet someone new. It's true, people really think this car is very special. It's a unique car. It's the favorite car of the French. It's unique, symbolic, and as emblematic as the Eiffel Tower or the baguette, a fine example of the art of French living. Within the 2CV design group, there was a team that had designed the front-wheel drive in 1933. Flaminio Bertoni and André Lefebvre had been hired by André Citroën to design the front-wheel drive. In fact, the 2CV was initially called the Citroën 2CV forward-wheel drive, and it follows in the footsteps of that predecessor, but of course on a reduced scale to be more of an everyday car. Pierre Boulanger was a man who didn't hesitate to push the engineers working on the VSC to go on and dream up solutions to seemingly impossible questions at the time.
They began to test building the car body using oilcloth. You see, they had ideas that today seem far-fetched. Someone tried to build headlights using fireflies.
The plans show 2 iron wires holding the chassis like a hammock. They still had a very open mind. They invented an ingenious windshield wiper designed to wipe a larger proportion of the windshield. The length of the wiper varied depending on its course, so that instead of just wiping in a small circle, it stretched out 3 inches to cover a greater part of the pane.
Later, Mercedes started to make more modern cars, but Citroën was far ahead of its time in 1938-39.
Michelin had experience with aircraft construction because Michelin manufactured aircraft during the First World War. During the 30s, Michelin produced rail cars, which led to their use of new materials like light metals, aluminum, duralumin, and coated fabric. This manufacturing experience was then put to use in the development of this new type of vehicle.
Michelin was a true pioneer in cross-marketing ventures. Any inquiries organized by Michelin in the 20s and 30s perfectly illustrates this. But Michelin was also very innovative in everything that concerns the promotional aspect of marketing, in other words, communication. The Michelin Man is really an extremely important marketing tool. The tire is black, and the Michelin Man is white. The tire is not user-friendly, while the Michelin Man is very friendly. The suppleness and curves of the 2CV are maybe owed to the genes of the Michelin Man. The engineers from Michelin and Citroën collaborated with each other to develop and test the prototypes.
Pierre Boulanger took the role of guardian of Edouard Michelin's legacy in order to guarantee that his vision was well respected and that technical innovations were actually always practical for the customer.
My grandfather wanted to test all the prototypes, first to verify whether they were comfortable and to check the suspension, and then, following these matters very closely, he brought to his sons in Paris on Henry Martin Avenue a motor and a gearbox. They needed to dismantle it because he wanted them to know how to do a little mechanical work. They simply forgot that there was oil in the motor, and my grandmother told me she had not really enjoyed seeing the oil drain and gearbox in her apartment in Paris, that it was so messy. So my grandfather wanted to test the suspension because he had decided that the car shouldn't bounce more than twice after a bounce, which was a very ingenious system derived from aviation. My grandfather, the aviator, attached great importance to this, that each side of the front and rear wheels should interact with one another. So if you look look under the 2CV, you have so-called suspension points, and when the front wheel jumps, the rear wheel is flattened on the ground and vice versa, which gives the impression that the car drove on two wheels while turning, while in fact it didn't. During tests of the prototypes, he wouldn't dare to let his top hat leave his head. And the tests took place way out in Auvergne on the small steep mountain paths, on both hills and plains, on a bit of bad road, a bit of good road, all to test suspensions.
Ultimately, I get sicker in newer, more modern cars than I ever did in the 2CV. It drives so gracefully. It doesn't hurt your back. No, it doesn't hurt your back. And it's funny because wherever we go for a spin, whenever we cross people's path, they flash their headlights. We've always had one. Occasionally, I would wash the exterior and the interior, and that was it. And I complain when she doesn't drive.
Marcel Michelin, the son of one of the founding brothers and thus the grandson of André Michelin, tested many prototypes of the VSC in the area, including on a famous bit of coast called the Barrack Coast, between Clermont-Ferrand and Orsens, a little mountain town. Marcel Michelin wrote Pierre Boulanger with his impressions of the VSC tests on this notable coast. The only trouble is the crank. Even in the cold, the engine runs really well. When hot, it starts with only a quarter turn. It ran so well that I wondered if a small string wound on a pulley couldn't also work, with the string potentially pulled from the driver's seat. I finally decided not to attend the daily VSC testing because I was so conspicuous. In Clermont, it was rumored that I was trying to build a new armored military car.
In 1937, Pierre Boulanger bought a property to the west of Paris near Chartres, which belonged to Saint-Simon and Louis-Philippe IV, 2,000 acres, surrounded by a 10-foot-high wall. There was an old farmhouse that he used as a test track for the 2CV, and it served as a testing track for a very long time.
The car was designed without heating, so in winter the car was freezing. They designed a cardboard heating apparatus that converted heat from the engine. Upon returning to La Ferte, they happened upon Mr. Boulanger.
They showed him that the heating worked great and cost nothing extra. It worked like a charm.
The studies led to an initial prototype, first presented to the mining department in 1939. It had a strange, extremely rustic appearance. However, they had already designed a number of highly innovative solutions, which ended up being retained in the car's final design. The use of lightweight metals and canvas canopies for the roof. Again, very simple, lightweight, and economical. This car should have been unveiled at the Automobile Salon in 1939, except that the event never took place.
When war broke out, the production of the 2CV, which had just begun, was stopped. The project was shelved and the story might well have ended there. But that sort of thinking underestimates the determination of one man, Pierre Boulanger.
My grandfather asked that all the prototypes be destroyed to avoid that the Germans should get them. He heard quite a bit of talk about this Ferdinand Porsche, a notable doctor, who had come to my grandfather while developing his Volkswagen and to see a bit of the 2CV. He came several times in 40, 41 to the plant at Javel to try to see the 2CV, even bringing a prototype of his Volkswagen.
The idea to build a small household car also existed amongst other manufacturers, competitors of Citroën. But Citroën made the deliberate effort to go on and develop some very innovative technologies for the 2CV. At the very least, these technological implementations were much more innovative than you would find in any of the competition's cars.
Faced with the advance of German troops, Citroën had to leave Paris, where the Levallois plant had been partially destroyed, and fall back to Niort. All production lines were requisitioned for the war effort, but the 2CV wasn't to be silenced. Instead, it joined the resistance.
Engineers continued to work on the project in secret, as it was forbidden to work on new vehicle projects at the time, but even so, they were able to develop and mature the project.
And Bertoni, who was an admirer of BMW, strongly insisted that Citroën draw upon BMW's flat twin engines and air cooling system.
It was even simpler for the customer. It didn't use water, there was no radiator, no risk of it freezing in winter, and it was even more convenient and affordable.
The first two CVs didn't have electric starters. In one test day, there were 48 cars, and they all failed to start. And after 20 or 30 times, my grandfather catches the first handle he saw under the car. He pulled it and pulled off the handbrake, obviously. And so on that day, he said, okay, we'll put in an electric starter.
When I was young, I had a 2CV. In fact, I had several, one after the other, and then after that, I just drove boring cars. 4 years ago, as part of my work, I wanted to teach some young people with mental disorders how to repair 2CV and discuss the mechanics of simple cars. 2CV was perfectly suited to what I wanted to show these young folks. I met a guy who had two wrecked cars he wanted to restore, so we rebuilt the white car we have here, the 2CV pickup. We did it over 4 school years with these young people, coming from the Edouard Seguin Institute at Pompignat and the Child Medical Center in Romagna. We worked 1 half day each week until the car was built. In fact, it's a totally unique model.
Leaving behind the chaos of war, France regained its freedom and once again began on the pursuit of happiness by drawing upon its deepest values, brotherhood and equality. The 2CV was meant to become a symbol, but was delayed, leaving the press and the public highly impatient.
We have to understand the context. Raw materials were very difficult to obtain, and under the Ponce plan implemented by the government, each automaker was limited to the production of a single model. It was not anticipated that Citroën would produce a small car. The Ministry of Industry dictated that Citroën should manufacture big cars, and that other companies, such as the so-called National Régie, should produce the small vehicles. Boulanger went to battle so that the 2CV could be manufactured as well.
And that's an ugly car. Where's the can opener? It's true that this tarp made it look like a tin of sardines.
Can we get a can opener that goes with the car? That was symptomatic of people's astonishment when they first saw the 2CV in 1948. It really was a mobility tool rather than a particularly nice car. The look was a bit strange and the color was sad, so it may have seemed surprising to see this type of vehicle coming from such a major manufacturer as Citroën.
People were used to seeing cars that were geometric, rectangular, and square. The advent of the 2CV brought the first car with a rounded form, and it was revolutionary. At first it was mythical because everyone was walking around the 2CV shaking, trying to see what was this vehicle. It was a huge surprise. We were able to test the suspension, put it back in, and every night the staff of Citroën completely remade the car. The story goes that in 1948 the 2CV didn't even have a motor, and instead cinder blocks were inserted to give it the correct weight. Because the starter wasn't developed enough, the motor was not there, and so it wasn't attached to the engine.
In 1948, during the immediate post-war period, an automaker would release one vehicle every 5 years. All eyes were on this project since the life of the Levallois plant depended on the 2CV. When I was around 14 or 15 years old, I begged my father for a 2CV until he finally cracked. He said, it's either a moped or a 2CV, and I said I want a 2CV. So I never had a moped. I always had my bike, but I always had a 2CV too, and I restored it up until I was 18. This is not a car. It's not an object. It's really part of the family, since there have been so many stories associated with it. Often people keep them for 30 or 40 years. They got them when they got married. They went to such and such place in France, and they had an accident in it, and etc., etc. There are so many countless stories in this car. I've even seen people come to tears retelling them.
In 1949, 13 years after the project launched, the 2CV was finally ready for market. It came at a time when thought, ideas, and dreams had a prominent place in society. The 2CV became the symbol of great victory for the people.
From the moment when people or dealers tried the car, they were extremely surprised by how comfortable it was, by its performance, by what it could get done, and by its price tag and maintenance costs. Orders soared, probably beyond what Citroën had imagined.
Les commandes s'envolent, sans doute même au-delà de ce qu'avait pu imaginer Citroën.
Pour qu'il y ait pratiquement d'un seul coup,
From that point on,
qu'elle a été présentée,
beginning with the Expo, when it was introduced, it took 3 years to prove its popularity. That it would interest everyone, all of society was captivated by this car.
concerné par cette voiture.
It was practical. It could be used for all trades. We removed the rear seats. It became a truck. When we went camping or picnicking, we used the chair of the 2CV as a sofa while camping. We were driving on vacation and at the wheel, and compared to any modern production, it's true that it has no electronics, no accessories other than driving pleasure and the ability to travel. In mint condition, like this, a 2CV is almost too beautiful, in my opinion, to be worn out. I'd be afraid of damaging it, as with a modern car, which costs dearly to repair. This is simple, carefree, and it works.
The 2CV started at 185,000 francs, so about half the price of a tractor, making it much more accessible than any other car on the market at the time.
The problem was not so much the price, it was how to have it delivered. In 1957, they didn't take direct orders because there was a 3-year waiting period. So we took the orders on a school notebook. And then after 2.5 years, if the person was still alive, we sent in their order. And their 2CV would be delivered 6 months later. There are even stories that say to have a 2CV, you had to order at the same time the tube and the 2CV. And then you were a priority client. Priority clients were also priests, veterinarians, and doctors. I think that's a record in the auto industry, that people were able to wait 3 years for the delivery of their car.
At the Levallois factory in Paris, where the 2CV was manufactured, the rate of production was gradually accelerated to manage faster delivery. Once more, the little Citroën was the object of technical innovation and ingenuity, with one half built from the ground up on an assembly line, and the other half built with specialized labor to produce the remaining parts. It was a true revolution.
In 1956, I had to find myself a 2CV at all costs. It worked for me such a long time, and I wanted to find the car of my youth, so I finally found it one day, through a friend who gave it to me, an old hood, and therefore Type A. Not bad at all. A 2CV Type A for a collector. I completely restored it. It's rare to find an original 2CV from these years with all the original parts. It was capable of 50 miles per hour. There were no flashing lights, no stop, just a flasher in the back. A police license plate, a light, that's all. A hole for the handle. A child once said that this was the key to winding up the car.
Fate struck the little Citroën once more, when just 1 year after its release, Pierre Boulanger killed himself while driving his car, just a few miles from where 2 members of the Michelin family had already died. He would never know the success of the 2CV.
When my grandfather died on November 11th, 1950, we began to see the 2CV more clearly, but at the time the sales didn't go so well. It was 100 or 150 per day, and it was far from the massive sales that were yet to come.
Pierre Boulanger, a private man, remained in the shadows. His name is little known today, but the town of Lamdes, where he chose to settle, pays homage to the father of the little 2CV that defined so many generations. Soon, happy 2CV owners felt the need to join forces and sharing the joy of independence and leisure, now within the reaches of all for the first time.
Already one felt the urge to come together over the sentiment inspired by the 2CV. This very early passion for the 2CV was immediate. Our club, the Club of Friends of the 2CV, is a national club born in 1980 in Lamdes. And it currently brings together more than 500 members spread across Europe. It has members in Belgium, Italy, England, Switzerland. It's a big family. You should know that countries like Belgium, Germany, England have thousands of members in their clubs. People who are really passionate about the 2CV. There are several kinds of fans of the 2CV. The sociable ones, who like to hang out around their car with other groups of people. But then there are the solitary ones as well, who appreciate their car privately. There are people who are extremely strict and won't tolerate a single part that isn't original, and opposed to them, there are the entertainers, capable mechanics, for whom it's a sacred work for them to turn a 2CV into a convertible, a station wagon, a van. There are all types of these people who try to create astonishing and fun cars. On the other hand, there are people like me who ensure the car is as close as possible to its original state, but will concede the odd, fantastic change, providing it isn't permanent.
I present to you Cosmotache, because these are cosmos flowers, and the color comes from flowers themselves. And seeing as I love cats, they accompany us around the whole day. I have a beautiful love story with this car. I completely redid it. Nuts, bolts, screws, everything was taken apart and reassembled and repainted to suit my taste, which wasn't easy for the person who did it. And now it's a gem. I'm very proud of it because it makes people smile. It spreads happiness all around, even to adults. It makes people smile, and this fills my heart as well. So I'm pretty happy with this car. The 2CV was originally conceived for local, daily travel, but even so, it has managed to climb the highest peaks and traverse the most arid deserts. It was the first car to instill a sense of adventure and the desire to see the world in a whole generation of young, freedom-loving people.
The technical scheme of the 2CV made it an extremely reliable and extremely robust vehicle. Suddenly, some of its early drivers didn't hesitate so much to travel far away, even to the ends of the earth. Even though that wasn't initially expected, the 2CV has managed to take explorers anywhere and everywhere.
5 continents, 8 deserts, 50 countries, 200 miles a day, 350 nights under the stars, 2,247 hours at the wheel of this car, 100,000 kilometers. This was a one-of-a-kind French automobile. In a journey like this, the most significant thing is running out of juice and having to push the car. When we crossed the Andes, at the time there weren't any real roads. We did the last few miles in reverse, after removing all 4 doors and the trunk lid, everything that wasn't essential, because otherwise it wouldn't run. And at the end of 150 or 250 miles in the Atacama Desert, which is a terrible desert, the ground was shifting. Of course, now it's paved, but it was terrible. A terrible challenge to overcome. I heard a rattling sound. I raised the engine, and there was no more oil in the crankcase, completely dry. And I realized I forgot to refill the oil. I had filled it with gasoline, no oil, and above all, I had forgotten to fill the reserve, so there wasn't a drop of oil. It was night. So we stopped, and since it was very cold, we made a fire using heated stones, and in the morning, when we were taking tea, a Chilean came by. In all deserts, there are people who come from God knows where. They're out there on foot. He had a backpack, and we invited him to drink tea, eat biscuits, and we explained our failure, and he laughed. He took some bananas out of his saddlebags and put them in the crankcase. He took a small piece of cloth and a stone, because the cap had flown off too, and closed it and said, "There you go." And it worked, because sugar is really, in the end, just fat. It did not exceed 40 miles per hour. We caused huge problems because when we arrived in the United States, our dream was to go on the highway since it didn't exist in Europe. And we got on the first highway that we came across. And after 10 minutes, we were arrested, just like the film posters covering the walls of buildings. They thought we'd stolen this car that they had never seen before, and they arrested us for slow driving. Not speeding, slow driving. In 1973, I was fortunate enough to have the chance to participate in Raid Africa. To do this, we needed a 2CV, and I had prepared a 2CV myself because the cars needed extra modifications, especially suspension, reinforcements, and extra autonomy by adding an extra fuel tank. We had 6,000 miles of track that the car needed to be able to survive. So we went to Abidjan, Ivory Coast, and Niger, and from Agadez, we headed toward the Tenere Desert. I was 23, and the memory still haunts me, even now.
Over time, the 2CV evolved, but retained its curves and the general, ever-recognizable shape that had made it so endearing and popular.
The basic 2CV is a work tool that is rigorous, sober, and austere, so we released a luxury model at the same time as the Bootlid in 1956. The 2CV had grown, and it was given a little more powerful engine in 1954 with the Azam model, which was 12 horsepower, 26 cubic inches. It wasn't until the 1970s that we developed the 2CV6, as it were, 37 cubic inches, and then the 2CV4 with 27 cubic inches.
Since yesterday, this vehicle has sparked serious curiosity around Draguignan. It really has something about it. It appears to have two front halves of a 2CV welded to one another. The car thus possesses all-wheel drive in both the front and in the back, allowing you to drive in either direction. Such is the purpose of this vehicle, currently, yes, unique in France.
On the occasion of its 40th anniversary, and much to the public's dismay, the news broke that production of the 2CV in France would be halted.
The car had adapted to changing standards and regulations, but there came a point where it no longer met regulatory requirements, particularly security standards, and so in 1988, Citroën decided to stop making the 2CV.
Dad absolutely wanted the last French 2CV, a Charleston, so he ordered it way in advance, a red Charleston and a black 2CV. After his death, I inherited the 2CV, so now I drive it. It came out February 29th, 1988, so this is the last French Charleston.
The halt of production on the 2CV was carried out in several phases. First, Citroën tried to replace the 2CV. The Diane, designed by Hank Morar's team in 1967, was meant as a replacement for the 2CV, but the 2CV outlasted the Diane. So the transition didn't happen so simply. The next step was the closure of the factory in Levallois in 1988, which had manufactured the 2CV since 1948, and production was transferred to Mangual de Portugal, where it continued until the end of July 1990.
In Paris, protests were mounted against the halt of the production of the 2CV. They told us that the 2CV no longer satisfied regulators, so they had to give up making the car.
The 2CV petition was the Citroën's club's request that 2CV production continue, since production was being stopped on such a phenomenal success. It had been manufactured for over 40 years, so it had completely validated the Michelin brothers' initial instinct, and the requirements laid out for the VSC, along with so many unexpected benefits. It led to something extremely technologically advanced, yet at the same time very playful and fun to drive.
My dad was the director of the production of the 2CV in Portugal, and the vice director, Mr. Sebastio, asked my dad if he was interested in himself owning a 2CV, and my father said, "You know me, I made 2CVs in Portugal and Chile. 2CVs don't interest me." And then after his little post-lunch nap, my dad came back to the factory and said, "Okay, yeah, I'll buy one. I'm buying one, since it will be the last." And that's why the last 2CV was reserved for my father. It came out on July 27, 1990, in the Mangualde factory in Portugal. Therefore, it has little bumper caps to prevent pedestrians from scratching themselves on the hand shock. That was at the request of Germany. It has an interior all very special called Internal Nazaré, which is a small fishing village in North Portugal. It also has a small lighthouse, a rear reversing light and fog light. And it also has the famous trunk door, which opens much higher than normal 2CVs.
On remet tout ça. Et voilà.
In 1994, during the enormous site clean-out, getting rid of all the old body parts, the employees of La Ferté-Vidame made an incredible discovery.
We arrived in the attic under tarps full of dust, and we found the models of these three 2CVs. We were a little shocked. We looked and we said, but wait, these aren't body parts, but practically complete cars.
These three virtually intact pre-war prototypes are exceptional testimony to the research of the engineers who worked on the VSC project.
The way they would have done it, it would be to hoist the cars up, then construct the floor underneath them. And then the cars were just rather forgotten in this famous attic. One of them is from the first run of the 200 road-ready cars.
The design of the 2CV was such that its platform could give rise to many different versions. And if the family of two-cylinder Citroëns is so extensive, it's because of this platform, which is the basis for the 2CV, the 2CV van, and the MI6 in 1961. In total, 10,000 vehicles were derived from the 2CV, a colossal number. 1 out of every 5 vehicles in Citroën production is a variant on the 2CV.
Together with all its variants, the CV numbers 7 million models on 4 continents in 18 or 19 countries.
Even today, 2CV gains new fans of all ages each year. So much more than a car, the 2CV was a mixture of ingenuity and pragmatism, unique in automotive history, and will forever remain a symbol of the art of living.
There's a national gathering every year, an international gathering every other year. There are 17,000 vehicles still around. The 2CV represents the world, represents the automobile. It represents humanity. It represents a great moment of happiness.
I have lots of 2CVs. I must have almost 20. I've got my 2CV Charleston, my 2CV Sport, my 2CV Special, my 2CV Made for the Raid, my 2CV van that I use for backpacking, camping, or to tow my motorhome, and my old 2CV, my 57, my 60, my 59, my 51, my Azam. It's a total passion. I love them all.
Donc c'est une passion aussi, je les aime toutes.
I'm in the 2CV club in Daphne Vivarius. Since 2009, I've organized these race rocker courses, and right now we're going to the Trans Championship in Saint-Lizier. A rocker cover is part of the 2CV engine. That's the protection of the car's rocker.
Qui se trouve à la protection des culbuteurs de la voiture.
And the purpose of these small cars, as they are called, is to mount the cash rocker on 4 wheels with a regulation which says it must not exceed 700 millimeters long, 200 millimeters wide. It must weigh less than 4.5 kilos. It's delirious, like a child's game, but for someone in the 2CV clubs.
Les clubs de chevaux.
Since Michelin first undertook the project to design the ideal car, I don't think anything else has surpassed it. You might also say that this car was universal. What was defined by Marcel Michelin as the ideal car in 1930 may still hold true today.
Today there's much talk of marketing and cheap innovation. Cheap innovation meaning using the least amount of raw materials, as little energy as possible, finding solutions that are perfectly suited to customers' needs, to user needs, and the 2CV had already fully achieved these values. The 2CV really stands out today as a true marketing pioneer, which is why today it's still quite modern. It remains part of the art of living for all who are passionate people. Owners of the 2CV love their cars, and they continue to worship their 2CV.